Today is the internal deadline for the Defense Department to submit to the White House its plans for dealing with automatic spending cuts, sequestration. Unless Congress reaches a deal by March 1st, the Pentagon faces a spending cut of over $42 billion, and that is in addition to the $487 billion reduction in defense spending over the next decade mandated by the Budget Control Act passed in 2011. Cliff May is president of the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies, and he joins us now from our Washington bureau. Mr. May, welcome to Bottom Line. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Mark.
Talk to us about the impact that these cuts will have, not just on defense, but on the overall economy.
Well, there are two important issues. One on defense. I think Leon Panetta, who has been the Secretary of State for the past 4 years, said it well. He said this would hollow out the military. This is not a good time to hollow out the military. The economic ramifications are many. It's a little harder to say, but you're talking about a lot of communities, obviously, that are dependent on either shipbuilding or the ports, or they're dependent on the military in general, and they won't have any time to adjust. It's one thing if you take a slow slide down over a 10-year period and you reduce military spending,
right.
But where communities are dependent on it, they will feel it, and we will feel it in the economy because people out of work will ask for food stamps, will ask for unemployment insurance, will ask for other benefits.
You just spoke of Secretary Panetta. He warned that if the Pentagon cuts are enacted, it would leave the United States, in his words, a second-rate power. Is that going too far with the rhetoric?
Well, this is coming from Leon Panetta. He is the Secretary of Defense picked by President Obama. He has quite a distinguished record before him in Congress and other positions. I don't think you can take that as simply rhetoric. You certainly can't take it as politics. I think you have to take it as a very serious warning. Mm-hmm. When he says a second-rate power, he knows what he's talking about. And this is not a time, it seems to me, because I do think we have global conflicts right now that we have to fight, that we can afford to be a second-rate power, and we're sending a very dangerous message to our enemies.
Yesterday, John Brennan, he's President Obama's nominee to be CIA director, he defended the use of drone strikes on suspected terrorists. His testimony before the Senate Intelligence Committee was interrupted a couple of times by protesters who were critical of his role overseeing the drone strikes, which reportedly killed 3 Americans and an unknown number of foreigners. What's the legal justification for these strikes outside of a theater of combat?
Well, a couple of things. One is we don't entirely know because the memos have been classified. We've seen a white paper based on the memos that sort of spells out the legal justification, but we haven't really read it. Now, President Obama, I think, is going to release those memos so that the Justice Department, this is Eric Holder's Justice Department, they have their reasoning, and we can all, or at least members of Congress, will be able to examine that. Mm-hmm. In terms of theaters of combat, of course, what is a theater of combat in the current war? If you have someone if you have an al-Qaeda commander in Yemen or in Mali, is he in a theater of combat or is he not? I think the concept of theater of combat has expanded greatly. And if you have an al-Qaeda commander, someone who's declared war on the United States, whose mission is to fight the United States, we're at war with al-Qaeda and its affiliates, then I think we're almost wherever they are is a battlefield.
Mr. May, how do you define wasteful government spending, particularly as it relates to the military?
I guess it's in the eye of the beholder to a certain degree. Best people who are experienced, people who understand the Pentagon, who understand the military challenges of the present and of the future, sit down and say, all right, if we have to cut, here's how we're going to do it. We're going to do it in a very deliberate way. We're going to make hard decisions, but we're going to make important decisions. The way you would do in a business, the way you would do in a home. What you don't want are automatic spending cuts where you simply have to slash and you really don't have any decisions to make. Mm-hmm. Not only is that likely to happen when the sequester comes in, it's already happening. We have had 2 aircraft battle groups in the Persian Gulf for the past few years because we're trying to send a message, very important message, to the regime in Iran. Right. One of those battle groups is being withdrawn right now. That is a mistake that we are making right at this minute as a result of this sequester threat.
We have about a minute left. Does the Pentagon have any flexibility in terms of contract spending? Will some contracts be voided, setting up potential legal action? And will there be less multi-year contracts? This is going to negatively impact the defense sector.
It will negatively impact the defense center. There's going to be a lot of belt tightening. I would imagine that the Pentagon and its many attorneys who they have there will say there are contracts that if we try to, if we've made long-term contracts and we don't have a clause to get out, the last thing we need is litigation, because that's a terrible waste of taxpayer money. But again, all that means that you don't have the kind of process in place you want. If you tell good Pentagon planners who really know what they're doing and a good defense secretary who really understands the organization, look, over the next 10 years, you've got to cut by 10%, 20%, whatever it is, they can make some reasoned decisions, one hopes. But if it's automatic spending cuts or it's sudden spending cuts, that probably can't be done. The Air Force is talking now about having its radar on for missile defense only 8 out of 24 hours. Well, I guess we just better hope that nobody attacks us in the remaining hours.
Cliff May, he's president of the Foundation for the Defense of Democracy. He's joining us from our Washington bureau. Mr. May, always a pleasure to have you on. Thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you.